Really?
Oh. Which item are you on the agenda for, Kevin?
E3, I believe.
Are you the applicant?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You'll be able to speak at that time, but it will probably not be until after 4 o'clock. So you're welcome.
After 4 o'clock?
Yeah, so we're gonna have a workshop for an hour before we pick up
Okay,
the
then
other
I
agenda.
shall call back in.
You can either stay on the line or call back in. It's up to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll call back in closer to 4.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other callers?
Yes. Caller, when you hear the two beeps, it's your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record.
Melissa Fraker.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Can we help you?
Yes, I am calling in about TW asphalt plant that I did not know was going to be on the agenda today.
Okay.
I'm
You want
opposing this asphalt plant.
Okay, that agenda item will not
Hello?
be. Oh, okay. All right. Yes, we'll take your comments now.
Okay.
You're Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay, we've been dealing with this asphalt plant for 5 years. They have shut down the asphalt plant this year. It has been wonderful around our neighborhood. Now, I just found out 2 days, I was never notified of this being on the agenda today, that we were going to have him possibly back smelling up and polluting our neighborhood.
Okay.
So I'm wondering what is going on with this. Has there been any difference in his operation? Has there been anything new that will allow him to operate this? I know at 4:00 this morning there was jets from the 4:30. Excuse me. There was jets coming from over the hill. No smell, but you could surely hear it. So I want to know what is allowing him to operate again.
Melissa,
With no notification.
Melissa,
With no notification.
Melissa, it's Hope, the planning manager, Hope Sullivan.
Hi, Hope.
Hi, Melissa.
Hello, Hope.
Okay, the commission is listening to your comments. They can't engage in conversation. They're going to be having a hearing later in the meeting. So this is your opportunity to provide them with comments. And when you concluded your comments, they'll take the next person's comments. But they will be discussing this no earlier than 5 p.m. this evening, okay? And then if you want to call me in the morning or tomorrow, we can talk about things. But at 5, not before 5, they will deliberate. This is the opportunity for you to make comment. Okay? Thanks, Melissa.
Yes. Thank you, Hope, and thank you, committee. But this has been such a menace. You can't open your windows here. You cannot live properly in a community. We have been here 31 years, as you guys all know, and he has not complied to anything that has been arised in either meetings. We've been put back and forth, and I want to know what is the attempt of shutting this down permanently. Because I see no difference in his project over there than I have seen when all this fines and stuff has been around our neighborhood. And I have one more. My husband is going to...
No.
Okay.
You need to stop.
All right. Well, thank you so very much, and I hope you can help us in our neighborhood. You have a wonderful rest of your meeting, and I will talk to you tomorrow, Hope.
Thank you, Melissa. And if you want to tune back in, we will take up that item after 5 o'clock today.
After 5, yes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other callers?
Caller, when you hear the 2 beeps, it's your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record.
Judy and Robert Lucas in Mound House. We have tried everything to shut this man down. Unless you live here, you don't have any idea what we're dealing with. We cannot sit outside. We cannot have people over to have dinner or anything outside because he'll start his, we call it cooking. He's very arrogant and he's a liar. Do not believe anything he says to you because he will not do it. It's terrible. Well, now the children have to wear the mask, and I understand that. But before this virus started out, kids had to stand at the school stops with masks on because of the smell, and he does it at 4:30 in the morning. He does it at 12:30 at night. I've got page after page after page of complaints that we have done, and we don't understand why somebody doesn't do anything. We spoke to Nathan yesterday, and he's on restriction from them, from NDESP, NDEP. How can you find any justice in letting him continue to poison us? And the only thing I can do is like I've always done. One of you are welcome to come and stay here for a week and smell it and see what you think of it. But we're tired of it being back and forth and back and forth. The only thing some of us have all talked about is a class action lawsuit. And the lawsuit should be with the person should be sued who allowed him to go there, to start a business there. They did not check his any of his anything. They couldn't have, because it's all very, very bad. He's also had a fire up there. Now, if he has a fire, thank God his employees yelled at the firemen that the propane tank was full, and they saved us from having a terrible, terrible fire here. And if that blows up, because he keeps 10,000 pounds in it, it'll be like a major earthquake here, and it will destroy us all, plus fire. So please, 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 I'm begging you, do not let him start up again. Thank you, and I believe my husband would like to speak. Please hold on.
Yeah, this is Robert Lucas.
All right, sir.
And okay, the only thing I've got to say is that you guys know his track record. We've been dealing with this for a few years, as Misty said, and he doesn't. When we were allowed to come to the meetings, he doesn't keep any promise that he makes. He makes you guys promises to get what he wants from you, and then he goes out of that meeting and he doesn't keep them. We're back again, and then you give him 3 more months, and then we have to go back again, and then it goes over to the Board of Supervisors, and they turn it back to the Planning Commission. Nobody seems to want to make a complaint. Of course, there hasn't been any complaints lately because he's on a shutdown order from NDEP, and he closes in the wintertime. But you guys know his track record. What I'm telling you isn't anything new. I mean, so this is wrong. We're tired of being poisoned. We don't know what else to do. We don't want to file a lawsuit. Well, it'll be against him. We've got 75 people on a petition, and you guys have got a copy of that if you kept it, of that petition, and we don't know what to do. We're tired of being poisoned. So please don't give this guy his license. So he doesn't come to the meetings anymore. He started sending his lawyer, so his lawyer can talk for him. And he's probably his lawyer's there now. I don't know. But the guy, you can't believe anything he tells you. So please don't give this guy his license back. When he shut down, we have clean air, and we thank you for what you've done. So, Hope, thank you. We'll give you a call tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hang up.
Well, I don't see if there's anybody else.
Looks like, do we have any other callers? Looks like we have one more. Okay.
No more public comment at this time, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. I would like to also note for the record that we did receive an email public comment from Maxine Neitz, and that'll be recognized. Everybody has a copy of it, has had a chance to read it. So thank you for that. Possible action, approval of the minutes of December 15th, 2020. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion for approval?
Motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Is that by Commissioner Perry? Who seconds? Commissioner Aswan. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, modification of the agenda. Items on the agenda may be taken out of order. The public body may combine two or more agenda items for consolidation, and the public body may remove an item from the agenda and delay discussion relative to an item on the agenda at any time. Mr. Plum, I understand we have some modifications today.
Yeah, thank you, Lee Plumel, Community Development Director. I just want, we're basically going to take the items on the agenda in order, but I do want to, for kind of meeting management purposes, make you aware of how kind of this is going to operate. The first item on the agenda is our discussion, workshop type of discussion on Title 18. We plan on having that until about 4 o'clock, when actually I have a commitment. I need to step out of the room at that time. So we're going to take that item, the first item, until about 4 o'clock. After that, we have E2 and E3. We'll take up those items. And the fourth item on the agenda is not before 5 o'clock. So it's likely we'll get through these items before 5 o'clock, at which time you can take a recess. And I think that'll be a good time to take a recess, because you all have late material in front of you from the representatives of Tahoe Western Asphalt. It's a response to the staff report and the regarding the show cause and the findings and allegations in that. So make sure, and in any case, I think it would be appropriate before 5 o'clock to take enough of a recess so everybody has time to read their response, and they will also be on the line to address this issue. So that's how we're going to go through the agenda today. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Discussion and possible action regarding possible amendments to the Carson City Municipal Code, Title 18 zoning, sections 18.05.055, accessory structures, and Title 18 appendix, development standards, Division 4 signs. Mr. Plumel.
Okay, thank you. Now it's 45 minutes till 4 o'clock, so it's not even an hour we'll have to get through this. So I'll start with a little bit of background overall before we get into the details of discussion. Today I'm going to talk about quickly go through the general process we're going through on this Title 18 review for you, the new people, and anybody else watching. Then we'll discuss proposed development standards for signs, and kind of at the request, based on some past discussion at the Planning Commission, for a little bit of time at the end, discuss a little bit about accessory structures, which we've discussed before, but we have that section on the agenda as well. And kind of as the bigger process overview, I wanted to point out that this is early in the process. Our discussion about the sign code today is the very first discussion about the sign code. This is not a final action by any means. In fact, I'll talk a little bit more about that and kind of the process we'll go through with signs in particular. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But for the public, we are at this early stage, still seeking public comment. These draft documents, including the sign code that you'll be discussing today, can be found at carson.org/Title 18. And we are encouraging everybody to take a look at those documents and provide us comments through the website or in writing to our office. In looking at this process, I'll take this opportunity to discuss what we've been doing is kind of bouncing these ideas back and forth between the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. You'll note on my slide there, I have a to be determined date for the next workshop. And part of that is because there's been some discussion with the Board of Supervisors about some sort of joint type of workshop going on. And I think there's going to be some discussion about that at the board at one of their meetings in March on possibly creating some combined advisory committee that just tasked with looking at and making recommendations on Title 18. So I'll have to continue to keep the planning commission updated on that and how that'll work with upcoming meetings. So, any general questions on the overall Title 18 process? So I'm going to jump into signs. So in our development standards, Division 4 is our sign code. It was adopted in 2004. There's been some amendments along the way, some things added, different like freeway-oriented signs as the freeway has come in. There's also recently been a lot of litigation and court cases all the way to the Supreme Court on free speech issues as they relate to the sign code. I'm not going to cover a lot of that today. When we do annual planning conferences, there's hour-and-a-half sessions on just the latest sign code law over the last, what's happened over the last year. So we're not going to spend all the time going through that. But the upshot of this is that it's time to update our regulations because some of the more recent cases have thrown out sign codes that have content-based regulations, and our sign code, frankly, is loaded with content-based regulations now. So kind of generally speaking, like what I have up there, and so what's content-based versus content neutral? A content-based regulation is, for example, you're allowed to have 6 square feet for a real estate sign. So when you say it's a real estate sign, you're saying what the content of the sign is. That's not a drink Coke sign. That's not a buy Ford, not a vote for Pedro. It's a certain message. And what basically the First Amendment says and the recent court cases are that what the free speech issue is, well, you're favoring that message over, that's not the message I want to say. I want to say something else, and I should have the free speech right to say something else. So that's the basic concept of it. So a content-based regulation says you can have a certain size real estate sign. Content neutral is you can have 6 square feet of sign, and it's up to you what that sign says. So that's kind of the general overarching approach that we're taking in this updated sign code. I'd also note that to the very extent possible, there's been amendment, we're trying to keep the regulations the same as they were. And I'm going to go through as we go through the regulations, I'll talk about that a little bit more. And kind of one of the workarounds for this issue in itself about a real estate sign versus a sign that can say any messages, it appears, in looking at what others are doing and with some law recommendation, one of the ways to get around that is to say you can have a 6 square foot sign during a period in which the property is for sale. So we're not saying what the sign can say. You could say anything you want on the sign at that time. So, and again, going through, as we go through the individual changes from current to the new code, I'll kind of go into that in a little more detail. Oh, yeah, okay, I got to shift pages here because I want to shift over to your packet. So and I intended, but we ended up not having continuous page numbers for the whole packet on this. But let's start with the Division 4 summary of proposed changes. It's the first attachment. And this is where I am on here, and it's the first attachment on, starting on page 1 of that attachment is where I am here. So I'm going to get into kind of the details of specific regulations. So at this time, I'm not just going to blow through this. We'll stop at each one and see if you have any questions on anything. But, I've kind of summarized that first row there, that currently our regulations and standards are generally by use. For example, in our along a commercial corridor where it's retail commercial and you see strip malls and things, an office is permitted a lot less square footage than a retail use. So again, that it's retail signage versus office signage, and it's different, and we want to get away from that, and everybody in that retail commercial zoning district generally has the same permitted sign area. So that's kind of the big picture of it. Now moving into the specifics and generally going through the order of the current sign code. 4.7.1 residential uses are currently allowed what's there, that's why my example is 6 square feet, because the maximum sign areas is 6 square feet. And there's some other regulations regarding that. And the proposed regulation is based on not for residential uses, but changed to residential zoning districts. And then the maximum sign area that is permitted is based on the square footage of the parcel being 6 square feet for parcels less than 5 acres and 32 square feet for parcels over 5 acres. And the reason for that larger side is that coincides with other current regulations, particularly real estate signs, that on larger properties you have larger for sale signs and generally some other similar signs in there, but that's the purpose of that larger sign. Any questions, comments on that? We'll stop there. I see.
I have a question about your lighting
Okay,
on the residential.
right.
The indirect is just the backwards lighting of a sign, and the other is indirect, which means the indirect lighting is defined in the definitions. Illumination only is not. And I just question, do we have any illuminated signs in residential districts? I can see in 472 for multi-unit developments where you'd have a sign of some sort that could be illuminated. But why in single-family residential uses, if we're just basically trying to talk about a real estate sign or a sign that could be potentially used as a real estate sign, having all the lighting restrictions or things that are on it?
Well, is your question why have restrictions or
I mean, why
allow it?
have it at all?
So the indirect lighting, I think that, I think that definition should be clarified because I don't believe that currently, because that's a current definition.
But it's not in.
And I think it's
not in
intended-
our definitions in here.
It's in the draft, it's in the sign code, indirect lighting defined.
No, indirect only is, but illumination only isn't.
Illumination is indirect.
Indirect illumination.
So it only permits indirect illumination, which would
Okay.
be exterior lights shining onto the sign and shielded, not
Okay,
internal illumination
All right.
or the sign is actually lights itself, which I intended to point out. So kind of, if you look at, I'm going through here, the comparison sheet, and also attached after that is the actual code. And I think this comparison sheet is a good way to go through this, and I'll refer to kind of the sign code later and we can go through that. But the approach is to go to a kind of this table-based where you have the zoning or the type of sign, and then within that, on each line, you have the maximum sign area, maximum freestanding sign area, maximum sign height, what type of illumination is allowed, and whether or not animation is allowed.
okay,
And so that as you'll see, we're starting in the very most restrictive area, which is single-family residential. So these are kind of where the most restrictive signs are, where you generally don't want message center signs that are scrolling and having illumination. So
I'm sorry. Does somebody else have a question?
I can get my mic
Santa,
to
go
work.
ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm or ask if an example of in the current code, the identification sign, is that like an address? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, or is that a different type of signage?
I tried to peek for the definition. Not sure.
Okay, so in the existing code, and I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to, under the exempt signs, there's identification nameplates or signs on apartment houses, rooming houses, and trailer parks, public telephones, or similar uses not exceeding 4 square feet in area. So that's in, under exempt 4.4.7, C.
So the definition of identification is not further defined than that. And that 4 square feet is inconsistent with the 6 square feet that's in 4.7.1. But the proposed standard would take care of all of that and just be consistent.
Thank you both.
And then I should, and multifamily, just moving on to the next one, because multifamily, very similar issue with single family, except that the sign area would go to 32 square feet, which would allow for that's pretty typical monument sign or some sort of identification sign that an apartment complex would have, similar to what it currently is in like residential office too. That 32 square feet is a pretty standard sign size. Any questions on now single family or multifamily? Oh, got one. The buttons are pretty finicky, so if pressing it quick doesn't work, hold it a little bit longer or quicker.
I got mine working. I'll go.
And
Commissioner Wiggins can get his microphone working, he can talk.
Sure, Commissioner Wiggins, for the record. On the single-family residential using zoning districts, 2 questions. Is there any issue zones can change as we've seen by our meetings, as opposed to generally things stay residential versus switching to commercial? Do you foresee any issues with zones being changed and then the signage going astray? And also on the single-family residential zoning districts, it seems like the number of signs is not limited, whereas it was for you get one identification sign. Should we add that you get one max sign to that?
So generally speaking now with our current sign code, and I think in the provisions, we allow everyone to use their permitted sign area to split it up between signs. So that would be what our recommendation is for the sign area, is to not limit it to one sign, but that's certainly something you could add to, especially in the single family residential. And I think there's some areas there now, and I would say it would be one sign unless you have 2 street frontages, then you can split it between 2 signs would be more consistent actually with what we have now. So I think that's a good suggestion to look at that further and to be consistent with what it says now.
Commissioner S1, did you have a question?
I think that pretty much answered it. I was interested in knowing whether
per unit of business. Generally, it's per.
In any of these districts,
Yeah.
it can be. You just answered it. You say you could split it. You could
Well-
split your residential sign up into 2 3 square foot signs if you wanted.
Yes. And thinking when we get there, I think as I scroll through this, the terminology in commercial, it does distinguish when it means per parcel, total square footage allowed per parcel versus per business, I think is expressly kind of distinguished.
Okay, and then we just ran into this a couple months ago with the apartments down on the end of Curry Street, where they requested a second monument sign for their operation. Is there any way to, so that we don't have to go through these special use permits, is there any way to have to maybe give the staff some leeway in determining when an additional sign is appropriate?
That seems to be consistent with with Commissioner Wiggins' comment about the secondary one sign unless it's on two street frontages and,
But you still got the limitation on the total area for the sign.
yeah, right. So, yeah, that's something I'll explore in a little more detail for next review.
Now, if I can turn my
I turned you off. Yes, everybody, please use your raise the hand feature. I've got my screen up if you want to talk. So I'll be sure and see you. Commissioner Eswine, you raised your hand again? Oh, I'm sorry. All right. All right. Proceed, sir.
Okay, now we're moving into,
Wait.
Oh, did you have a question?
Wait, I have a question.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry.
Right there,
Commissioner
stop.
Wiggins.
Commissioner Wiggins, for the record. I noticed, and I'm sorry, it's only because we stopped here and I looked at this even closer. We went on 47.2 here. We went all the way up to 32 square feet from only 6. And obviously for a large multifamily residential complex, it probably makes sense. But what about just a small one? I would recommend adding the parcel size to this as well. And this maybe ties into, I'll just give my general theme on signage. I don't think large signs are as necessary anymore in our society. Everyone has GPS and knows where they're going generally. So making signs bigger and more prevalent, I don't really like that for our community. Now I'll be quiet for a while. Thank you.
Page 2.
yeah, and that, again, back to, and certainly this is the opportunity to discuss sign size, but, you know, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, there's been a lot of discussion over the past years and amendments to this. You know, for example, additional signage for auto dealers came about since 2002 when this was initially adopted. And so there's been some creep a little bit larger here, a little bit larger here. It certainly has not gone down in permitted sign area over the last couple decades. And this would be the time to make recommendations. I would say our approach in bringing this forward to you generally has been to rock the boat as little as possible on this. It is, you know, the other side of the argument is going to be that advertising is an important part of businesses and they need sign area. So we're trying to respect that and just kind of translate over to a new system of regulation, which gets us into the next page 2 and current regulations of office buildings, shopping centers, and other commercial uses.
And Commissioner Lloyd had another question.
Okay.
So I probably, thank you, Chair. Should have probably asked this when you were talking about content neutral signage, but is there any limit to what can be placed on a sign? And where I'm going with this is I just want to confirm that if we move to that we don't allow hate speech or something of that nature.
Right. This is where, you know, the DA's office, Ben Johnson's listening and maybe can weigh in, but certainly things like obscenities are still things that are prohibited under federal law would still be prohibited. Basically, that hate speech and things that are a violation of other people's rights and things are not permitted. And you know, so that this it's still subject to that. Okay. Did that answer? Okay. All right. Now, office building uses, shopping center uses, and other commercial uses, as I kind of mentioned earlier, currently all those sign area for those uses are based on the use, which means for one thing, it's kind of based on what the sign says, but another, it kind of leads to some inconsistencies along our commercial corridors, and we come across this in practice all the time. An office goes to some other use and goes back to an office, but the office is permitted much less sign area than the former tenant, and really just doesn't make sense to be consistent. This is not standard sign code practice anyway. So I think it's a good idea to go to a system where your permitted sign area is based on the zoning district instead of the use. So the proposal is to kind of take what that current office sign area that's permitted, and in fact, there's some specific exceptions to there for residential office and general office zoning districts. And those standards will apply in the residential office and general office zoning district, which, again, that's definitely the smaller sign area. It's only up to 15 square feet per street frontage versus a lot more as you see going down into other commercial uses, with the maximum freestanding sign area of 32 square feet, maximum height of 6 feet. Because these areas, residential office and general office, are in close proximity and even intermixed with residential areas. Again, the illumination is indirect lighting only and with no animation. Any questions on residential office, general office signs?
Let me ask you a question just in general about sunset. We're gonna change the sign ordinance and make some significant changes, and most notably, I'm seeing on all these are animated signs, which we have in dentist's office and everywhere else all over town. Can we put some sort of a sunset provision in this new ordinance that says, they're grandfathered for 5 years or 3 years or whatever it is, and then after that time, so we don't have to wait for the business to go out of business before we get rid of the flashing signs? Is something like that possible?
Yes, it is certainly possible to add a sunset provision, also known as an amortization provision for the phasing out of non-conforming signs and whatever specific element of the non-conforming size you're talking about. Except that I would say that we're probably, well, first of all, is your specific thing the animated signs?
No,
Okay.
but that just occurred to me by
Yeah.
looking at this. But we're going to make some significant changes to a lot of signs, and a lot of people are going to be legal non-conforming for a while. It's just the question is, how long are they legally non-conforming, or how long are we going to go along with? We have this new sign ordinance, but 10 years ago, all these signs were like they were, and that's why we can't change them.
My take on it is that this sign code change in itself will not create a lot of non-conforming signs. Again, trying to stick with it to the existing permitted as much as possible. In fact, if anything, some of these offices that are in some districts, some commercial districts, will then be allowed to have more signs, so they won't be non-conforming. And we already, in these residential office and general office, they're already limited to this smaller size. So like in that situation, as in the next one, shopping center uses, we're proposing to keep the same regulations. So I don't see this change creating a lot of non-conforming signs. I could say we have a lot of existing non-conforming signs, even to this code, because we have a lot of signs that were erected before 2002.
Well, that's another reason to do the same thing. Because if we adopt a completely new sign ordinance that makes all of these things that were done before 92, 72, 08, whenever it was, they're going to have to conform.
They're going to, within some time period.
Within a reasonable time period.
And and in particular, just to follow up on the comment on the flashing signs and animation, actually, we've recently, it's been within 2 or 3 years now, maybe probably more, a little bit more, but that we instituted regulations. They've been permitted, they're still permitted, and they're permitted now, and the regulations be the same, but it's only recently that we've put some limitation on the movement and animation. And that's why I asked about that in particular, because we could say all animated message center signs have to come in, they may not have to tear down their 25-foot sign down to 20 feet, but they may have to bring their animation into compliance with the animation standards, for example. That could certainly be done in terms of, as you said, including a sunset clause.
Okay.
So we'll put a pin in that for today
Okay.
to think about that, but it's certainly something we could think about going forward as to what elements of this we want to bring all signs into conformance with, certainly.
Commissioner Perry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Knowing that we're getting close to the time here, I had a few questions or comments on, so I'll move a little bit beyond this, and I don't know if we're kind of come back to it or not, but I had a few things. One in definitions that's not addressed, and that is the term a wind flag, okay, which is a term that the sign makers use for one of those flapping things that sits on a pole. And I think it's defined somewhat in banner, but the term is not defined in here, and it is a commercial term. So I just bring that up of where should it exist, or should we reference it in here someplace?
Look at the commercial of feather flag, because I think
Yeah.
that is what,
Commercial.
that's a relatively new definition that was intended to
Commercial
capture those.
feather flag?
No, just feather flag.
Feather flag. Vertically oriented banner of flexible material attached to a single pole, allowing the fabric to hang loose at one or two sides of the banner. Okay, so that's a wind flag.
And then that term is used in the code. For the-
And is there a limitation in here on how long those can be up, or can they just be permanent forever? And the reason I see that is I see, some businesses using these basically as their business flags permanently, as opposed to something that's sort of a temporary, we're having a big sale and
I thought in the last revision we did to the flags, that feather flags were only going to be allowed for like 30 days or something, and then they had to be removed.
Right. Those were, I'm looking for it is something as we go through this list that we will get to. I'm just trying to find it specifically, that there are current regulations regarding those that were discussed and amended quite a bit in the last couple of years.
okay.
Well, even, yeah. Everything's we didn't do anything in 2020. I got to remember that. So everything's at least a couple of years ago. Changeable promotional flags.
What page is that?
Well, in terms of the comparisons, our proposal is not to change that. I'd have to find it in the code, but there are, whatever the current regulations are for those, our proposal is to keep them the same. And there are limits, and they shouldn't be lining the street. They have to be up against attached to the building.
Okay.
And they're an issue of enforcement on an ongoing basis.
I guess that's another one of my questions is, how often do we have complaints or have to investigate issues around signage? Is it real common or not common? Hope's bobbing her head yes, so I'm assuming it is common.
Common, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and I think, yes. And with an effort to periodically do some active enforcement so that it doesn't get to the point where it's out of hand. Because if those flag sort of things quickly become, oh, my neighbor has it, I'm going to get one. Oh, he has it, I'm going to get one. So we try to the extent we can, stay on top of it and let people know what the regulations are.
Okay. Now my third question, and this really relates to the Supreme Court case and trying to understand in here if this is addressed. So, the Supreme Court case basically said during political season, right, you can put up flags and people can put up messages and pretty much anything else during that time. Well, political season's a third of our actual time now in reality in this country. So does that change? Teresa, I got to try and word this right. Is there still a restriction to put up message signs? Is there still an on-premise requirement? Let's say that. No, that that someone can't put up a commercial sign at another business advertising their business during political season just because they can do it, according to this Supreme Court case. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm trying to think about how to approach it. Well, you skip from political signs there. So I plan to, when we get to political signs, that is a point where we're going to stop and discuss alternatives. Because currently, as you said, well, to answer your question first, yes, it's still an on-premise
Okay.
requirement for where you put your sign. You can't put one in the right-of-way. But, yeah, I'm going to get into the
Okay, I'm
discussion at
moving
this
ahead
point
too
of
fast,
of those. Yeah, if you want to take that up. But you're right in saying when sign area is permitted, you can advertise your neighbor's business on another property as long as you have the sign area permitted to do so. That is a basic tenet of the sign area. If you're allowing one commercial message, you have to allow any commercial message. And if you want to advertise your next door neighbor's business, you can do that. That's a kind of a basic premise of the
Supreme Court decision?
Of the for First Amendment right to what you say what you want to say. Which has implications then when we also get into the billboards and our recommendations regarding those, and not wanting to get involved further with billboards. Because as you're pointing out, any sign area is potentially a billboard.
Commissioner S1.
Okay. So you just said that a neighbor can allow the other neighbor to advertise on their property. Now, whose sign limitation is it? Is it the business that's advertising, or is it the neighbor's sign?
Yeah, no, I didn't say you can allow your neighbor to put their sign on your property. You can use your sign area as a property owner, what's permitted on your property for whatever message you want. And if that's for your neighbor's business, that's.
So you're not increasing.
Not increasing.
You're not increasing the business's signage area.
Right. On any given property, the sign permitted is based on what that property is.
Okay.
And that regulation, not what.
Okay.
The sign got.
Yep. Thank you.
We may get there. Keep going.
Okay.
We got about 4 more minutes.
All right. Yeah, and as we stop, I mean, I kind of realized even with a couple hours talking about this is a topic I figured we'd have to revisit. This is pretty deep stuff. It's a big change, big in terms of how we're doing it. This is something we're going to want to get out to the public. So this is certainly going to take some time. So we're just trying to go through big picture now. Shopping center uses, as I've noted, so shopping centers, because they have multiple businesses, do have different regulations now. And this is kind of that first area going through this where we kind of work around. It's not just a zoning district. It's if you have a property, the description is if you are a property with multiple businesses on it, multiple units, which we can do by business licenses, then you are a shopping center and subject to these regulations. It's still not content-based, but there are some different regulations that allow them to have more overall signage, and in particular, the freestanding sign that advertises the shopping center. Generally, per business, it's the same regulations in it as any other commercial use, but they're allowed more freestanding sign area for a shopping center.
Okay. You want to stop there?
And well, why don't since we're on commercial use, we're fine. They said, let me go through.
It's as just as a matter of aside, working on this table is an easy way to see what we're doing.
Yeah, good.
To use the table is a good way to help us get through it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I got 5 minutes, and I'll take it just because I think you're going to get through the next items before 5 o'clock. So moving on to other commercial uses. So in the current code, it's other commercial uses. So this is your general single or maybe one or two commercial businesses on a commercial property. And they're permitted a certain sign area and a certain percentage of that on the freestanding sign and certain height. And the idea is that those same standards would just carry over to the commercial zoning districts as they are now. Basically, it's permitted in all the same districts. And I think in there is that, yeah, so the idea is just to, again, not to change the standards, but it would be based on the zoning district. The difference again is that in those commercial zoning districts, there's often offices that have different standards, and there might be other uses that have different standards. And I would note the other commercial uses, I'm trying to find it because somewhere in here, I'm not sure it shows. I want to make sure that it's in there. Those same sign standards would also apply to the general industrial zoning district. I thought I had it. Oh, general industrial. There we go. No. Okay, that's the next one. All right, so then commercial, and then we have signs for manufacturing uses. Again, getting away from that, and those the current standards we have for manufacturing uses, which are generally a little bit less sign area than in commercial areas, would apply to the limited industrial, general industrial airport, air industrial park zoning districts. Those are general areas that are not along our commercial corridors, primarily over by the airport and in that vicinity. And with the exception is that the general industrial district would carry forward the commercial sign area standards, because the general industrial area is actually, a lot of it is along our Highway 50 East corridor. So that is a commercial corridor. So the recommendation is to put those standards there. Any questions so far on that? I think that's kind of where I'm going to conclude my.
I have one from Commissioner Eswine. Well, for the recorder, she needs you. And they're all Commissioner wired. Preston, can you make your mic work? We'll start with you.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay. Can you consider including the downtown mixed-use zoning district in the same category as the neighborhood business in terms of the signage limitation? I just think that if we're trying to create an enticing downtown, that maybe signs would have an impact on that.
Any other, so the proposal with the neighborhood business, the difference being that the total sign area is a little bit more limited, down to 300 square feet, but consistent with commercial, and that sign animation is prohibited. So those are the only
Right.
differences, right?
Right.
Any other thoughts by commissioners regarding that?
No, that's probably a good call.
Questions?
Commissioner Preston had one, and then you can split.
Okay. My question again, and I have a hard time hearing you, and I don't know if you were talking about the animated signs, Commissioner Eswine?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, because my question for the animated signs is in the general industrial zoning district next to the airport, I was wondering if I didn't think they allowed animated signs.
There is some general industrial near the airport, but that's mostly not. There might be some general industrial in the vicinity, but that's mostly the airport industrial and limited industrial and other general industrial airports. So those lower ones, are generally permitted there. And actually, you're right. There's currently no animation restricted in those areas, and they generally don't use it, other than they would have to, if they're in that close a vicinity to the airport, they'd have to comply with FAA requirements. But that's, are you suggesting that there should be limits and animation in those areas? Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think that,
I am suggesting that there be limited on animation in the airport districts.
yeah, okay.
Kind of the same exception like we did above. Okay?
So if there's no further questions, we'll take this up. We can take this up later this evening. If you wish, we can take it up at another date if you wish. But right now, we can table this item, and we're going to continue on with the agenda. Heather Ferris is going to present for staff on the next items on the agenda.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I got to raise my hand.
Go ahead,
There we go.
Commissioner Perry.
There was one other item there on, that Lee mentioned at the beginning, and that was to revisit 1805-055 accessory structures. And if it's acceptable to, I'd like to go back to that one later on today, as I've done some preparations of thoughts on that one. And that way it can be finished off.
Okay. Well,
Since
both
we're-
of those were in the workshop
Right.
agenda items, so when we come back, we can talk about it then.
Thank you.
Okay? Is that all right with you? Lee? Is that okay with you? Okay. All right. Hurry up, you're late. Heather, you ready? Okay. Item E2, we've tabled item E1 for the time being. Item E2 is discussion and possible action regarding a request for an abandonment of a portion of public right-of-way totaling approximately 0.39 acres along the south side of Beverly Drive and the east side of North Roop Street, adjacent to properties located at 911 and 1101 Beverly Drive, APNs 002-121-15 and 02121-16. Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you, Heather Ferris, Associate Planner, for the record. The request before you today would allow the abandonment of a portion of right-of-way along Beverly Drive and North Roop Street. The portion to be abandoned is approximately 0.39 acres in size and measures 13 feet wide by 1,328.6 feet long in front of the Senior Center and Autumn Village Apartments, and continues along the North Roop frontage of the Senior Center parcel. The area to be abandoned is the area behind the existing sidewalks and has been improved by the adjacent landowners with landscaping. The portion of the right-of-way to be abandoned would be reverted back to the adjacent parcels. Staff is also concurrently processing a parcel map associated with this parcel, and the abandonment is conditioned on the concurrent recordation of the parcel map to ensure the appropriate public utility easements will be established and retained along the frontage. The Planning Commission reviews the abandonment and makes recommendation to the board. The board has the authority to approve the abandonment. When considering an abandonment, the Planning Commission and board must make all 7 findings in the affirmative. Staff was able to make all findings and is recommending approval subject to 4 conditions, also included in your staff report. Robert Nellis and Randy Rice with Public Works are here representing the applicant and may wish to address the Planning Commission, and I'm available for questions.
Okay. Are there questions for staff before we start? The right-of-way what we're talking about is behind the sidewalk, correct?
Correct.
So we have the curb and the sidewalk, and then there's 13 feet.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is the applicant? The 4 conditions for recommending of approval?
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Robert Nellis, real property manager for Carson City.
Okay. It was, you all are the guys that are doing this, not the property owner.
We are the property owners, sir.
I mean, but you're gonna give the property back to these other property owners.
Yes,
Okay.
on Beverly Drive, 1101
okay.
Beverly Drive.
And the recommendation conditions of approval the staff has recommended are okay?
Yes, sir. they are.
Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay. Commissioner Lloyd?
Mr. Nellis, are both parcels owned by the city of Carson City, just to confirm, or?
Commissioner Lloyd, just the parcel on Beverly Drive on the corner of Beverly and Roop, the 1101 Beverly Drive is owned by the state.
Okay, and then we would be giving back to the state the right of way, or?
That is correct, yes.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Commissioner Perry?
I have my hand up. So it's the senior center in the middle, and off to the, I'm looking at my map here, to the left is a thrift store and something that is for the Hispanic population. I forgot the name of it exactly, but it's looks like a nonprofit of some type. And on the far right, there's an apartment complex, right?
Yes, sir, that's
Okay.
correct.
So that's private property there. So basically what we're talking about there is there's only one piece of private property here. The rest of it is public property that we're abandoning the right to.
Actually, it is confusing when you look at the map. There's, on the corner of Beverly and Roop, there's the United Latino building, as we
Right.
call it, but it's vacant at this time. That's owned by the city. And then you have the senior center that's next to that as you go along Beverly, so that's also owned by the city.
Okay.
And as you go further along on Beverly at 1101 Beverly, that is owned by the state.
You mean the apartment complex?
The apartment complex.
That's owned by the state of Nevada?
Yes, under the housing division.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. So it's all public, basically.
It
Or
is.
abandoning. So there's no money involved in this abandonment?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further comments? Discussion? Motion? Higgins?
Go ahead.
Commissioner Lloyd, go ahead. You got your mic on.
I move to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve AB 2021-0008 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
Is there a second? Commissioner Eswine seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, discussion and possible action regarding a special use permit to maintain an existing billboard on property zone general commercial located at 2400 East Williams Street, APN 002-105-01.
Thank
Heather, you
you.
can do this one too?
Yep, I'll do this one. Heather Ferris again for the record. The subject billboard was approved in 2006. It is located on the north side of East William Street, just west of the freeway. The property is currently vacant. However, there were businesses located here at the time the original SUP was approved. The billboard has been at this location for approximately 15 years. Here's some Google Street views of the billboard. Looking at the top, looking east from Russell Way and East William Street intersection, the bottom looking northwest from East William. Per Division 4.8.3 subsection A2 of the development standards, a special use permit issued for a billboard will automatically expire within 5 years from the date of issuance. The applicant is seeking to renew the SUP. The subject sign meets the existing standards and staff has not received any complaints regarding the sign. There are 7 findings of fact the Planning Commission must make in the affirmative in order to approve the special use permit. As outlined in the staff report, staff has made all findings and is recommending approval. Kevin Johnson with Outfront Media is representing the applicant and participating by phone, I believe, and I'm available for questions.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Johnson, are you available?
Are you talking to me, Mr. Chair? Ben Johnson, Deputy
No, no,
District Attorney?
Kevin Johnson. I'm sorry, Ben.
Apologies.
This is Kevin Johnson with Outfront Media.
Hello, Mr. Johnson.
Am I?
Are you
Hello.
are you familiar with the conditions of approval on this? The 6 conditions of
Yes,
approval?
I am.
Are they acceptable to you?
Yes, I am.
Or do you have any other
Yes,
comments?
they are.
Do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
No, I do not at this time, but I'm open to questions if there are any.
Okay. Commissioner Perry, you had your hand up. I don't know if it's for the applicant or for the staff.
It actually was for staff, so on page 3 here, on the discussion, I just had a question here. The subject parcel is located on the north side of Highway 50 East. The primary business on the site is automobile sales and repairs. The only thing I see on the site is a sign. Am I missing something?
As I indicated, it's vacant at the time, and I believe this is included in error. At the time that it was originally approved, there were several businesses on site. That was before the freeway went through.
Okay.
So a lot's changed in that area in the last 15 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Commissioner Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. There is a reference also in this to mobile home 6,000 zoning. Was that also removed when the freeway went through?
Yeah, so currently that parcel is not near mobile home 6,000. I would have to look at the zoning map again to verify, what was there previously, but currently there's nothing in that area that's mobile home
Thank you.
6,000.
Any other discussion? Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve LU 2021-0022 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Mr. Wiggins was playing with his toys over here, trying to do it on electronically. But so he'll second your motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Heather,
Thank you, commissioners and staff.
Mr. Johnson, is that you?
Yes, sir.
All
Yes.
right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Heather, you might make a note if we talked about this being what it's zoned, and if it's zoned, RV 6,000 or whatever, it might be a zoning map amendment consideration we do at the end of the year. And just put it on the list of things we want to do. At this time, we are going to adjourn until 5 o'clock. Till when? To recess. I'm sorry. We're going to recess until 5 o'clock, or at least until Lee comes back, and we might continue our workshop. But at this time, we are in recess.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Sorry, Ben Johnson. Sorry, Ben Johnson, Deputy District Attorney for the record. I just wanted to take the opportunity to remind everyone that the open meeting law is still in effect. So while you're reviewing your materials for the next item, just a reminder not to discuss it amongst yourselves during that time period.
Thank you very much. And we'll watch ourselves. 4:35. I'd also like to make a note for the record that at 3:25, Commissioner Preston did make it to the meeting and has been here and been voting, but I just wanted to recognize that she was here at 3:25. Okay, Mr. Plummer.
Okay, back to, again, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director for the record. Going back to item E4, what was on the agenda was to discuss Division 4 of the signs, but also we put it on the agenda to talk about Section 18.05.055 accessory structures in particular. That's kind of based on some comments and actually some recent special use permit review by the Planning Commission. So this is a section we talked about before, but at your request, kind of put it back on the agenda to discuss a little bit more. So I think if we can probably knock this discussion regarding this section out and come back to signs later this evening or at a future meeting. We still have a lot to talk about in signs. We got cut short. Apologize for that. And I think we need to probably just take a lot more time with signs at a future meeting. But anyway, regarding accessory structures, as has come up every time, what this relates to is the detached accessory structures and the need for some sort of administrative permit or a special use permit, depending on the aggregate size of one's detached structures relative to the size of their main residential dwelling unit. Currently, the standard is in pretty much all residential zoning districts that when the cumulative square footage of your detached accessory structures exceeds 50%, you need an administrative permit. That's the same thing as a special use permit, except it's just an administrative hearing officer done in staff. It's not done at this meeting. And when you get over 75%, it comes to the Planning Commission. And the proposal is to increase those thresholds to 75% and 100% respectively, and to also allow a minimum size accessory dwelling by right. So I think we've had that discussion before. I have the table up on my screen here that shows the various changes, and that was generally discussed previously. However, what there is not is a limit on the maximum size of a dwelling unit that you can have ever on a parcel. So in theory, you can build up to all the setbacks and all the height requirements on your entire property, as long as you get a special use permit. And I think, that's caused some little bit of struggle with the Planning Commission when you get some very large size accessory structures on a property. I would say we haven't gone to the point of saying that there's a maximum limit, because in all cases, the accessory structures have been within the permitted footprint where you could have a main dwelling. In other words, there's no limit on the size of the house that you can build. You could build a 1,200 square foot house. You could build a 5,000 square foot house to your permitted setbacks and height requirements. So I think the purpose of the special use permit is to, on an individual basis, review kind of those impacts that it might have to adjacent properties. But I appreciate the discussion that there's not some really set criteria, so that's the purpose of this come up. I know some commissioners have comments on this, so I'll just kind of, with that background, let you have some discussion and give direction on that.
Okay. Mr. Perry?
Okay, there, I raised my hand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because I've jotted down some notes after putting some thoughts into this, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into this by staff, and for Mr. Plemmel's kind of covering what the rules are right now and what we've proposed. But I go back to, just the last year here since I've been on this commission, we've had 4 of these that I can remember, with comments and opposition by neighbors on at least 3 of them. And the comments that I recall were, the size is too large. It's inconsistent industrial sized buildings in residential neighborhoods. Loss of view due to height. Other large structures in neighborhood being finished as permissive accessory uses after they're built. And those are the ones that I remember. And that's why I got a little red flag in my head on this one, thinking, okay, these are getting bigger and bigger. In the last meeting we had, we approved one that was 254% larger than the basic size of the house. And I recall Commissioner Wiggins rightly saying, well, how can you penalize somebody that has a small house with that on 1805055 number 7? And I think that's consistent. It's 1805055 number 8 that I think needs some proportionality to it. And that's the one that says that if the proposed accessory structure is greater than 5% of the square footage of the lot, then it requires a conditional use permit. So, some of me kind of looks back and says, all right, how fair is that? Most conditional use permits are based on things like, what you need a CUP for in a zoning district to build a church or some facility in a residential zoning district. But here's one that's a conditional use permit that basically says, if you don't like the 5% limit, which is in there for a reason, for $2,450, you can go to the city and go to the planning commission and try to get around it, right? That's a perception, I guess, that I have of this. And the 5% limit to me, probably kind of rotates around, okay, what's reasonable on a lot with respect to, drainage and landscaping and the consistency with the neighborhood and all of those things that are actually defined in 1805. Well, I lost my notes here, but they're defined on what are the reasons for a conditional use permit. I think it's 1805-02. So I would propose here, this is my thoughts for chewing over, that 1805-055 be changed to read, accessory structures shall not exceed 5% of the parcel size on parcels 21,000 square feet or larger, period. Scratching out, comma, unless approved prior to issuance of a building permit by special use permit. So why? In other words, leave the 5% limit in there as the maximum. If somebody wants something bigger than that, it's not allowed even under a conditional use permit. The 5% parcel rule is there for a reason. It's drainage, landscaping, compatibility with surrounding properties, all of which are listed in definitions of what constitutes a special use permit in 1802-080. Most of the special use permits in our zoning code are for uses within zoning districts, as I mentioned, such as the building for schools, churches, municipal wells within a zoning district that does not specifically allow them, and those are good reasons to have it there. The 5% cap is a reasonable proportionality for an accessory structure on a lot of 21,000 square feet or more. And that's what number 8 says. This only applies to 21,000. It doesn't apply to agricultural buildings or anything. That's exempt from this. So if you had that, a 21,000, which is roughly half an acre lot, would allow for a 1,050 square foot accessory structure. A 1 acre lot would allow for a 2,178 square foot accessory structure. And a 5 acre lot would allow for somewhere around 11,000. So it would put a proportionality to this so that we don't see, I want to build a 6,000 square foot accessory structure on my 1 acre lot, which consumes, 10 or 15% of the lot to it. And I think that's what I'm hearing from maybe some of the comments in the past. So I'll leave it at that after putting some thought into it and I hope there's some discussion on it, because it is a change and it would kind of do some limitation, but it does still allow people to build it. I have nothing against accessory structures. I think it's great to have RVs and toys inside of them. But when they get to the point to where they're 10% of the lot, like the last one that we approved, yeah, I just think we're going to have continued problem with residents saying, what are you doing allowing these things in my neighborhood? Thank you.
Commissioner Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. I don't disagree with what Commissioner Perry was saying. I did want to note that, like, in residential areas, like my home, my lot is like 9,000 something square feet, but my original home is 900 square feet. And so to add a 2 or 3 car garage, space permitting, that wasn't attached, you wouldn't be able to do that because that would be over that square footage. So I think that taking that into consideration, maybe it's not 5%, maybe it's 6 or 7%, so that those types of accessory structures can still be permitted on smaller lots that have smaller homes.
If I could address that. So 1805055, number 8, says that only for lots 21,000 square foot or larger, so it wouldn't apply to your lot at all.
Sorry about that. You are correct. I read that wrong.
Kind of ancillary to this also, Lee, is there's no way for us to exercise any kind of architectural control. And I know what I'm thinking of is one of these that we approved is a tin building with a metal roof in a neighborhood that has all stuccoed homes with tile roofs. And it just doesn't look right. If it was even architecturally to match the neighborhood, it would be much more palatable, I think, than just a tin building. And I don't think we can do that. I don't know that we can do that.
We can do that. So Carson City has chosen by code not to so far get into the business of architectural design on single-family residential lots. But that is certainly an alternative. Rather, when you get into the special use permit realm over some threshold, to say that I guess to some extent we do that because we talk about, when you say it has to be matching materials and colors and things, and we talk about roof pitches in some cases, we do somewhat start to dabble in design standards in single-family residential under certain circumstances. And this is one where alternatively, when you reach a threshold, maybe it's not prohibited altogether, but then there's a height limit or an additional setback limit or something else. And, we haven't really put some alternatives on it to look at it. But I don't know, Commissioner Perry, is that, I get the suggestion of a hard line, but, perhaps we could also look at alternatives that include some stricter, for lack of a better word, design standards for the buildings that exceed this certain area.
Commissioner Preston?
Oh, I made it work. Okay, Commissioner Preston, for the record. I think that it is really important. I agree that these buildings that are these metal buildings, when now the houses are stucco, this actually affects the neighborhood, it affects values and so forth. So I, for one, would be open to having it be the same as the existing structure as far as made from the same materials. So even if it's a stick built with, T111, then put stick built in T111 if that's what's already there. But if it's stucco, it would need to be stucco. If it has Castle Rock on the front, it need to have Castle Rock. Because what it's doing is it is actually creating these situations where people feel like they're getting backyard mechanics and that type of stuff going on. And I don't think that that's what we want to have achieving, is what we're trying to achieve. We want people to be able to store their RVs and so forth, but also not be detrimental to the neighborhood.
Commissioner Wiggins?
Yeah, Commissioner Wiggins for the record. Since Commissioner Perry mentioned my name, I guess I better say something. And Commissioner Perry, you talked about the percent of lot area, and I still agree with those comments totally. I think the last example was a great one. What does anyone recall what that percent of lot area was in that case?
Yes, it was a 1 acre lot, and it was a 4,000 square foot accessory structure, so it was 9.1% of the surface area of the lot.
Okay, so I was guessing it was over 5, but not 10, so that's pretty close. And that kind of ties back into exactly what Commissioner Preston just said, is at a certain point, you need to match this stuff. This isn't an outdoor shed anymore. I can't see us going beyond 10% ever. And I don't know if we want to write that in as a limitation, but certainly over 5% would require some sort of aesthetic upgrades and capped at 10% of your lot size or something to that effect. I'd be in favor of that. Thanks.
I'd even take it down to 7.5. Between 5 and 7.5%, you'd have to architecturally match it. But I mean, all those are little nitnoys all along the way. I think the question is still, what do we look like? What do we look at for, accessory buildings, and how big can they be? And you're on one side, you've got everybody saying, I've got a 2 acre lot, I can put on it what I damn well please. And on the other side, you've got all the neighbors that say they don't want to live in an industrial area. And if somebody's got 4,000 square foot barns full of old cars, it definitely affects the value of the neighborhood. So I think we're still struggling with this, Lee.
And I'll throw another thing out there too. They're permitted to have horses, and
Yeah.
Horses like cover sometimes too. So and it's aggregate. So there's definitely some of the properties that have a number of horses that have multiple, either one large long covered structure for horses or that too. So you have that element of actual use going on in Carson City. Now those don't have to be 24-foot high structures to cover a horse. And again, maybe looking at some height restrictions above a certain percentage of area might be another way to address it. So we can come back with some options regarding that, I think. I'm
Okay.
seeing kind of general consensus, at least to explore some other options for.
Commissioner Eswine?
Yeah, okay. It comes on all by itself.
I witnessed he didn't touch it that time.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Perry's assessment on the larger lots, that a total lot area or total coverage is a valid restriction on the size of these things. And I would also like to second Commissioner Preston's position that we do need some architectural standards on these things. That anything that's over, or anything that requires a special use permit should be similar in construction to what's already on the property, and maybe even in the surrounding area. Those are my comments on that. And I think a height limit, it shouldn't never be higher than the existing structure.
Commissioner Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Lloyd, for the record, I just wanted to ask if it's a structure covering a horse, is that considered a farm structure?
So yes, in current code, we have a distinction between farm structures and accessory structures, which we're proposing to delete.
Okay.
For the very reason that we get a lot of farm structures that end up having cars and RVs in them. And really in terms of the impacts to the visibility and neighbors, I think we're just going that the structures we want, whatever the standards are, they need to be the standards for accessory structures. But I think we do need to be considerate that you might have open shed type structures for shelter that may, and maybe some exempt, because that's what, you have barns that are really nice and are enclosed, and then you just have let the horse get out of the weather type of shelter. So maybe we could think of a distinction for those types of uses as well.
Yeah, that's like something like a lean-to.
Yeah.
That the horse is just,
Open, only
yeah.
covered on 2 sides or 3 sides or less, yeah.
Well, I know one of the ones that we recently approved was the one on Ash Canyon in Winnie. And it was 5 or 6 bays. It looks really nice because they made it architecturally match the neighborhood and the house. And it's not nearly as offensive as you thought it might have been when you looked at it. And I think that goes back to the whole thing about if you can make it match and fit the neighborhood, nobody's gonna complain. But if it looks like a shed, it smells like a shed, it is a shed. That's all I got. Anybody else? All right. Commissioner Kilgore.
It seems simple enough to agree with the fact that obviously you want some uniformity in this situation when it comes to new structures and, of course, matching the neighborhood. But it's about as far as it can go with uniformity, as far as I'm concerned. But in this case, that's obvious and should all be predetermined when they're, of course, applying for the special use permits for these said structures. So to get something like that very uniform, so it's not misleading in any way and very easily understandable by these people. So whenever they're trying to pull these types of permits, they understand that they do have to meet these set standards for matching structures.
Commissioner Preston.
Commissioner Preston, for the record. One of the things that I wanted to ask Lee is, do we only have the authority to go over the ones for special use permits? Because some of these structures are 200 square feet, and if you have a 200 square foot accessory building and your house is 900 square feet and you're on a half-acre lot, then wouldn't you want to have that conformity too? Because if your neighbor only has a half-acre lot and you have a 200 square foot building, wouldn't you want to also have those same aesthetics?
Yeah, I think to your question, we don't, as you know, as I was saying earlier, we don't regulate that now, but could. And then just kind of a determination at what size. Is it the 1-horse lean-to or the 2-car garage or the 3-car garage? But we could certainly put in here that those same things, matching some similar language about matching materials on all structures over X square feet.
Commissioner Wiggins.
On that same discussion, we need to be careful with putting too much onus on people to not have some of these structures, because if you don't have a structure, it's going to go in your yard or in your garage. Most people are going to store their stuff in their garage and park their cars outside. So I just want to make sure it's only at a certain point we're really putting costs into these accessory structures. Heck, they're going to spend thousands and thousands on this, but as opposed to the smaller guy who wants to buy something at Home Depot, have it match only at a certain point, I guess. I don't want to discourage the use of sheds. That's just my thoughts. Thanks.
No, I would think we're talking about the larger lot sizes and not the smaller, as a general rule.
True. But if we do have the small house and the...
Oh, okay.
I was talking more from the aesthetics of having requiring them to make the same siding as their house, and their house was stuccoed. It's a landmark or something, and they want to put a shed in the backyard. gets expensive to stucco a shed, or, I don't know.
Commissioner Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to second what Commissioner Wiggins was saying and add that I would hope that if it was a small structure and we put into code that they would have to do these things, that it wouldn't come to a special use permit because the cost of the permit could greatly exceed the cost of building the structure. Right?
Yeah, and again, kind of looking at alternatives coming back, I would think 200 square feet would be the absolute minimum threshold because you don't even need a building permit below that for a storage shed. So we're not even going to see it for a permit. 200 square feet, your 10 by 20 minimum size 2-car garage.
Commissioner Preston?
Well, if you have a 10 by 20, can we at least go ahead on these smaller ones so it's not cost prohibitive to paint to match? Instead of having like a white next to a red, barn red, next to a blue, next to a green? Because especially if they continue to add additional sheds, even though it doesn't meet the aggregate, they can end up being all different colors.
Are you asking me if we want to get into code enforcement on determining if a paint color matches or is consistent? We'll think about it.
For that square footage, yeah. So, because it's like a 2-car garage. I mean, this is what we're talking about. It's something that's going to be about the size of a 2-car garage, even on a small lot. You know, that's a concern. A lot of these places, because if we're looking at some of these other zoning, they actually have CC&Rs that'll keep you from doing that. But in some of these other areas that don't have the CC&Rs,
Commissioner Aswan?
I got it to work. I just have a comment on the second page of the accessory structures. You have under the zoning districts, you have the not to exceed 400 square feet on the single family, and then on the third, where did I see that? On the first page, you have 500 square feet, and I just wonder why is there a difference between the overall, why is it 500 square feet in one case and 400 square feet in the other?
I think we're talking about because there are two different requirements, and the first one, the 400 square feet, relates to a threshold of size for setback, for reduced setback requirements or not, versus 500 square feet just being a threshold chosen for whether or not you need a special use permit.
But why wouldn't you just have them both the same? I mean, is 100 square feet that much
No,
of a
right.
difference?
Okay. Good look at, yeah. And that was just yeah. So which would you suggest, going
I
up?
would suggest the 500 square feet.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this item? Yeah, Commissioner Wiggins?
Commissioner Wiggins, for the record, as opposed to putting it in these provisions, when they do come to us with a special use permit and you're doing the findings of fact, and they come in with, I want to do 20% of my lot size with a structure like this. Do you guys have guidelines you guys live within? And are those written? Are they published?
Actually,
Maybe that way we're not writing a bunch of code when we have guidelines that would say, guess what? The Planning Commission is never going to approve something at 20%.
actually, you just addressed exactly what my thought process has been in listening to this discussion, with the exception of Commissioner Perry's initial comments, which my comment's not going to necessarily respond to. When we look at the findings, finding B reads in part that the use is compatible with and preserves the character and integrity of adjacent development and neighborhoods. I believe that's exactly what you're talking about right now. Now, traditionally or historically or in practice, the staff and past planning commissions have considered the matching paint color to be, to satisfy that requirement. What I'm hearing in this discussion is we're not so sure paint all by itself satisfies that requirement. We are thinking what would satisfy that requirement is matching materials. Oh, but then you might have a horse, so does it make sense for the barn to be in the stucco? Well, maybe not. So then we have to look at what's the function of that building in addition to the compatibility. So I appreciate that this may lead to some type of design criteria, but I think even more immediately, I'm hearing you all say, look, it's not just paint. That's not going to satisfy this anymore. And so we hear you. And as a staff, as we work with our applicants, we will let applicants know that to meet the compatibility and preserve the character and integrity of adjacent development and neighborhoods, this commission is going to be looking for something more than paint. So I think you've just, as a cross-section of the community, identified sort of what your expectation is, and we can relay that immediately. And with that sort of guidance from you on your expectations, I'm not even certain we would need design guidelines because one size doesn't fit all. So that's just my thinking.
Just to add to that, when you said if you're going to set a limit, be careful of the limit you set and the absolute limits you set, because that will be an absolute limit with no exceptions, on the one hand, and then, on the other extreme remains as subjective. So to the extent that we can provide written guidelines that people know about ahead of time that are certain, that's better for us to tell the applicant. So that's what I think. What's part of this discussion is trying to find that balance somewhere between there.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this item?
We have some alternatives to consider and bring back with future draft. Thank you.
All right.
Good.
We ready for item number 5 or item number 4? Lost my agenda. Item E4, 2010-00000115, SUP 1015-2. Discussion and possible action regarding the revocation or reexamination of special use permit SP 10-115 for the asphalt plant located at 8013 Highway 50 East, APN 008-611-31, 33, 37, and 41. Mr. Plum.
Thank you. Again, for the record, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director. For this item, which is a show cause hearing for possible revocation of this special use permit, I plan to give a brief summary of the issues just to help frame the discussion and action. Then I'm going to give our Deputy District Attorney, Ben Johnson, an opportunity, if I don't cover anything that needs to be stated about this process, the opportunity, but hopefully I cover things. And then, of course, the applicants and the applicant's representative has a chance to respond to the findings noted in the staff report, and we'll go from there. So let me proceed with a little bit of background on this. This is, as you've said, a show cause hearing regarding a special use permit for the asphalt plant located on Highway 50 East, as I have on the site plan there up on the screen. This is located on the border, near the border of Carson City and Lyon County. In Carson City, it's surrounded by primarily industrial and commercial zoning with some public zoning in the vicinity. And to the east is Lyon County and a residential neighborhood. So just, again, a high-level overview, not all actions of the history of this, but what's not noted in the staff report I don't think, is that this special use permit was originally approved in 2011. So the special use permit for the use of an asphalt plant goes back to 2011 on this property. Regarding the aggregate crushing facility portion of it, I believe it goes back even farther than that. But for the purposes of the special use permit you're considering with today, for the uses go back to, for approval for the uses goes back to 2011. So related to the discussion today, it was in December of 2019, after an annual review of the special use permit, that the Planning Commission directed staff to conduct an investigation based on complaints of odors from adjacent residents. Those investigations were conducted, monitored, code enforcement made site visits. You have a complete packet of information, obviously, with notes from and reports from our code, from city code enforcement, as well as from NDEP. And then in October, those were brought back to you in October of 2020. And at that point, you directed staff to initiate this show cause process and serve notice to the applicant as to why the special use permit should not be revoked or reexamined. The next item on there, a correction to the staff report. I had a note in there, and that's actually from the prior staff report, that the order to appear was sent on January 6th. It also had the wrong year of 2020. That was the first typo of the new year for me, where it should be 2021. But actually for this hearing at the end of February, notices were sent on February 2nd and 4th to the actual property as required by the Carson City Municipal Code, and then to other contact information also for the applicant and for the applicant's representative, and those notices are included in your packet as well. So getting to the purpose of the hearing, just kind of a reminder for background, and again, you have all this in your packet. I'm just kind of framing it up here. There are the grounds for a hearing for revocation of a special use permit include, number one, a failure or refusal of the applicant to comply with any of the conditions of the special use permit. And number 5, as it is in the code, any act or failure to act by the applicant or its agents or employees directly related to the special use permit, which creates or tends to create a public nuisance or is detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare. So based on those things and the investigation at the previous Planning Commission meeting on this matter, the Planning Commission found that, number one, TWA has been in violation of its NDEP permit, which is in violation of special use permit condition number 12 regarding compliance with applicable NDEP permits. Number 2, TWA has violated the requirements of special use permit condition number 17, which required odors to be suppressed. That's the old condition prior to June 4th, and then since then prohibits odors from being detected beyond the property, which is the condition, a revised condition that became effective on June 4th, 2020. And number 3, the TWA operation has created or tended to create a public nuisance to the residents to the east of the property in violation of the Carson City Municipal Code due to odors leaving the site on an ongoing basis, both during the hours of operation and when the plant is not in operation. So, and then just a couple more slides for my overview before turning it over for questions. Possible actions, again, this is in the staff report, but possible actions that you can take today include approval of the special use permit that's in effect. Basically, no act unmodified, which would allow them to continue operation in compliance with the current code requirements. And this reminded me to note that, sorry, I'm looking for my notes from the earlier city public comments, but this reminded me to note that yeah, I think you're right. The approval, your approval today does not allow them to go operate next week. They are still required to get their NDEP permits. This is just a special use permit. As noted in there, their NDEP permit is currently under a stop work order. They're not operating, they're not allowed to operate until they have an NDEP permit. And it wouldn't, in any case, they would not be permitted to operate until they fix all things required under their NDEP permit and have a valid NDEP permit. So I just wanted to know that. But in terms of your action, you could keep approval of the special use permit the same. They would have to operate under the same conditions as existing under the city special use permit. Number two, you can modify the conditions of the special use permit to address the concerns raised with compliance with the current conditions of approval. Number three, you can suspend the special use permit for a specific time period, after which would revert back to the special use permit, either as currently approved or with any modified conditions. And number four, you can deny the special use permit. And the effect of that would be that the special use permit would no longer be valid. And if there were a future permit, it would have to come back as a new special use permit to the Planning Commission and comply with all applicable codes and conditions at that time. And these are from Carson City Municipal Code, the possible actions you can take. I was going to note at the end, but I will note for now that there's a appeal process. The Planning Commission's decision today is final unless appealed to the Board of Supervisors, but the code does provide that any affected person or entity may appeal this show cause hearing decision to the board, and that's provided that they are an affected person, they have standing to appeal, and they have participated in writing or spoken on the phone or otherwise participated in this. Could be, depending on the outcome, the applicant or others affected person, and an appeal will have to be submitted within 10 days. So with that, I'm going to back up to your findings that the applicant is going to address to you tonight, the three things in violation of the special use permit. And maybe before turning it back over for questions, Deputy District Attorney Ben Johnson, do you have anything to add to this at this time?
Ben Johnson, Deputy District Attorney for the record. Thank you, Mr. Plemmel. No, you stated the process correctly, so I don't have anything to add at this time, but I am available for questions as we proceed.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Mr. Kilgore, Commissioner Kilgore.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kilgore, for the record. Earlier during public comment, I just wanted to clarify this. One of the callers did state that they had a petition that had as many as 75 signatures on it. Can we verify that?
I believe it was submitted before. I haven't seen.
Yeah,
it
there's
recently.
been previous, so just a little bit more background. I know we have a couple planning commissioners that haven't been through the prior meetings in 2020. There's been a couple, but I believe, so there's been this path, and aside from that, there's been annual reviews of the special use permit. And I believe, though, that petition was submitted with one of those annual reviews and is one of the reasons that we initiated this process. So I wouldn't dispute that there was previously a petition of signatures.
Thank you.
Mr. Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, if we revoked this, the permit, is that the same thing as denying the permit?
Yes, I think effectively, yes.
Okay, and so if they were able to fix some of the issues that are stated in here with NDEP, including their exhibit that they provided, they would be able to come back with an application for a new special use permit if it was revoked.
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Perry? Mr. Perry, can you move your mic closer?
Push and wait. There we go. So we put one restriction on this, or one request, that city code enforcement staff will monitor the offsite odors at least 3 times a month and maintain a detailed log. I remember that one after the meeting we had last year where we had so many people that came to the meeting. Did we do that? Do you have the log that says, you know, when it was done, how often it was done, and whether there was any odors or not? Is there a log to back this up?
Yes, and it's part of the packet. You see a lot of the complaints there, and it also includes the inspections during that time period. The requirement was 3 times, and you could see, I see like flipping through it in May, June, 3 times each, April, March, February. So not promising that through 2020, it was 3 times every month through 2020, in part because they stopped operating. But yes, we have logs of the inspections and the results of those.
Thank you. I neglected to get that far into it to go through that. That's on page 35 of the document here, it looks like, right?
Yeah, I see. It might be in a couple places. Starting on page 23 is one of the logs report.
Commissioner Wiggins?
Thank you.
Commissioner Wiggins, for the record. One of the things on this is I know we're talking about denying the whole permit, but you mentioned earlier that they have an aggregate operation as well. Do you know if that aggregate operation is still working? Or will be working? In other words, what I'm getting at is if we're going to deny the whole permit, maybe we should just deny the part that lets them operate an asphalt plant. If there's other parts of their operation that could continue, which didn't get complaints up until, you know, this recent era. Thanks.
Thank you. I believe rock crushing is part of their operation still, and that could be separated in any action you take.
Any further questions for staff? Is there a representative for the asphalt plant on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Thomas Padian on behalf of TWA.
All right, Thomas, thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. First, I just want to go on the record and ask if you guys have received our public comments.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Because I think there's been a mischaracterization of the facts here, particularly whether there was enforcement that had gone past TWA in compliance with the modification after June 4. The record that I have in front of me only shows a handful of times after June 4th, 3 or 4 maybe at the most, which certainly isn't in compliance with the 3 per month through December 2020, excuse me. And either way, I think we're putting the cart before the horse in this matter. As it was stated earlier, there's an appeal pending with the NDEP, and I think we ought to wait for that before there's a consideration of revoking the permit or further modifying it, because the NDEP really is the gatekeeper here. To the extent that TWA can fix their problems or the perceived problems, you know, that's really where we need to start, is with the NDEP. Particularly because the only evidence that's in front of us if you could call it evidence, are these complaints. There's no basis for the complaints. There's no names. Nobody's here to back them up. All we have are on paper complaints from unknown people. It's hearsay. It's not even admissible in the appeal, really. So I think really what we need to do is wait for the NDEP appeal to sign off on everything, and then to the extent that there's any actual complaints that are meritorious and have some evidence or founding in fact, after that, that's when this needs to be considered, and not now before the NDEP, who's the governing body, has a chance to take a look at this and determine whether there are in fact issues that need to be ameliorated, or whether there are issues at all.
Okay. Are there any questions for the, it's not a defendant, the applicant?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Okay, I didn't get a chance to push the button
Okay.
there. Thank you, sir, for bringing those ideas or those thoughts forward. I do have one question. So it looks like the appeal that has been proposed by Tahoe Western Asphalt is an appeal of the decision of the State Environmental Commission's ruling, as well as NDEP's violation and notice of assessed violation that they issued, and it's being appealed to the district court here in Carson City. Do you have any estimate of the amount of time that would take before there's actually going to be a decision? Has the court agreed to take it? Is it on the docket? Is there any realistic timing for what you're proposing there?
Well, as a matter of right, the court has to take the appeal. That's our client's remedy. But no, we don't have a set timeline. It's the district court, so we've got to go by their schedule, by their timeline. But TWA is not currently operating, as I think was stated previously. They're in a state of they're in a holding pattern at this point because they're at the mercy of the NDEP's ruling anyway.
Mr. Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. A question on that appeal as well. Can you give us a reason why there may have been a 4+ month delay in filing that? Because it appears that that was signed on January 11th of 2021 when the stop work order was issued last August.
No, I mean, I don't think there was a delay. It was just a matter of I'm sorry.
I don't think we caught the second part of that. We just heard that we didn't think that you didn't think that there was a delay.
That's right. We didn't think there was a delay because it was timely filed.
Is the aggregate plant?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is the aggregate plant still operational?
Yes, it is.
So if we revoke the special use permit, do we revoke the ability of the aggregate plant to process stone? Mr. Pummel? That's to Mr. Pummel.
Yeah, I think Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director, I think as Commissioner Wiggins pointed out, you could allow the aggregate crushing operation to continue and revoke the asphalt plant portion of the special use permit because it's for both.
Okay.
So that we would want to understand that distinction in your action if you do that.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Mr.
If
Perry, go ahead.
If I could comment on that and perhaps understanding the air permit on this, because I served on the State Environmental Commission when a couple of these items came through there with Tahoe Western Asphalt. I believe that the answer to that is that it still would be a violation of the condition that required a permit from NDEP, because the violations that shut them down were air quality violations that require point source collection of those particulates. So even though if we said, okay, you can continue to operate that, technically they couldn't.
Well, yeah, I'll clarify my answer. I guess they would still be required to have any applicable permits for that portion of the operation. But kind of as I said, with the permit in general, they need both a special use permit from the city and a permit from NDEP, and they can't operate either portion of that without both of those at the same time. So from the city's special use permit, you could allow the continued aggregate operation on this site. They would still have to get the NDEP permit, whatever applicable permit for that.
Do you have an NDP permit to operate the aggregate plant? Mr. Padian?
I don't believe there's a separate permit for that. I think it's all under one special use permit.
No, I'm talking about an NDEP permit.
Oh, yes.
But you've got to stop work on that permit so that the aggregate plant should not be operating. Is that correct?
I'm not 100% sure right now.
Okay.
On that.
All right. Mr. Perry? Did I turn you off? Okay. Is there do you have anything else you'd like to present to us, sir, before we proceed?
I'm sorry. My client just called me. Can I have just 1 second to consult with him, please?
Sure. Is the actual permit on page 21 and 22, is that the one we're operating under now? The one signed that Hope emailed on June 9th? 20? Okay.
Require aggregate plant operation. That's all you can say.
Okay, you ready?
If I may. Yes. So they're not currently running the aggregate. It's the winter, and I guess they don't run it during the winter. So there's no ADET permit, ADEP, excuse me.
Okay. Do you have anything further that you'd like to say?
I just like to reiterate that the public comments that we've drafted and put together for this explain our client's position, and I think those are the most important at this point for the commission to review.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lloyd. Commissioner Lloyd, there you go.
Thank you, Chair. I was just trying to look up while we were on that pause there, and I was not able to find it. But does anybody know what because it says in the NDP stop work order that they have to respond, and the appeal must be received to them within 10 days. But do we know if they are appealing that ruling, like if there is a minimum amount of time that it would then go to the district court? And maybe I'm getting too far into the weeds on this, really.
Mr. Johnson, you have a comment on that? I would think that it's really kind of none of our business.
Mr. Chair, Ben Johnson, Deputy District Attorney for the record. I'm not exactly sure the timing of what that would be, but I do know that I can confirm that the petition for review of the NDEP's decision to stop work has been appealed to the district court, so it is pending in district court, and summons to the parties have been issued. So litigation has been initiated in the district court. So it is, on appeal, on review with the court. And as Mr. Padian said, there's no timeline for when the court may make a decision on that.
Can you give us, in your opinion, kind of what the time frame is in the district court? What their calendar looks like as far as this kind of an action? Is it 6 months?
Okay, so
6 years?
I would say, well, so there's a mandatory, if there's a 5-year limit on all cases. So if you get to the 5-year mark, the court has to dismiss it. So we know there's at least that's the okay, as far as it can go. Just for another example, litigation regarding the hemp on Buzzy's Ranch that was started last year. So we're now, a year later, and we're still now just beginning the discovery process. So I would say it's at least a year, if not more, just general litigation before you get to a trial. It may be different for reviews of, court reviews of department decisions or something like that, but generally litigation is at least a year or more.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Group. Mr. Perry.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have some comments for discussion on this, and the first is a comment that I have to respectfully disagree with the attorney for Tahoe Western Asphalt that the NDEP air quality permit is the overriding permit in this. I do not agree with that. I think the facts of the matter are that it is a component of the special use permit that the Carson City municipality issues. So if I would say anything, the governing permit is the special use permit, and the air quality permit could only be issued if they had a place to do it in a plant. So I think that just the opposite is true. And, irregardless of all the issues around going to court on the violation of the air quality permit, which I would note it's the third violation that this entity has received in the last 3 years, I believe it is. They are in violation of the special use permit that the city of Carson City issued through the Planning Commission of Condition 12 and Condition 17. And that, to me, seems very clear. 12 meaning they do not have an air quality permit to operate right now, and 17 meaning it was described as the odor criteria, that it looks like clearly we had enough inspections out there to determine that that was the case. But I guess my main point is this body, we do not have to wait until NDEP makes a decision and it goes to court. We are the driving body of this, in my opinion. So for what that's worth, thank you.
Commissioner Preston?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Preston, for the record, one of the things that I think that is really imperative, because we have several different members of the board of the Planning Commission that were not here for all of the public hearings. We had hours and hours and hours of public hearings that we spent on this particular thing, and they were not nameless. They came in and they actually gave their names, they gave their addresses, they discussed the different things that happened, and they were all credible. So, you know, I think that they definitely, those people need to be acknowledged. Thank you.
Commissioner Wiggins?
Commissioner Wiggins, for the record, to follow up on what Commissioner Preston just said, in the letter we recently received, I underlined this. It said any complaints not confirmed by physical investigation should be deemed false and disregarded. Well, there's hundreds of complaints. There were people testifying in front of us. And so to say that everything that should be disregarded in this letter, I found that a little disturbing. That's it.
I think over the course of the last 2 years or so, we've had numerous discussions with the people on the other down the road, and while some of them are maybe a little more excited than others, I think the general consensus that mostly all of us came away with, I believe, is the fact that Condition 12 and Condition 17 were violated. You know, these people were on the record. They did identify themselves. We did have our independent examination of what goes on. And, I just don't see, and I agree with Mr. Perry, I think we are the governing document. And this special use permit is over 10 years old. We're looking at least another year. Personally, I can't see any reason not to allow them, when they come back in 2 or 3 years or whenever it is, and they can get a permit to operate this plant, that they can come back to us and get a special use permit as long as they can comply with the requirements that we're going to impose on them at that time. And none of us may be here. I just think we need to keep this in the present and not in the past. This SUP is 12 years old. And it's been fraught with problems for 12 years. I think it's time, personally, to kind of start over. Commissioner Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. And I do want to note, as a new commissioner, I did go back and watch those meetings. So those people are not nameless. They came out, they testified in person, and I think, we've heard them, and I want to acknowledge that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, somebody want to press the purple button? There it is. Commissioner Eswine, like to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Eswine, for the record. I move to revoke SUP-10-115 based on the evidence of failure to comply with the conditions of the permit and creating a public nuisance that is detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare, including emitting noxious odors into surrounding neighborhoods.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Lloyd, I will second that.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see I thought it was the no vote. All right, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right. Staff report. Mr. Plumel, I think we had enough fun for today, so we're not gonna.
Yeah, with that in mind, I'll check schedules and reschedule to continue our discussion on the sign code at a future date. Yeah, just a couple items to update. At the February 18th Board of Supervisors meeting, the Board of Supervisors approved the border crossing tentative subdivision map. I think that was before you in January. They approved it essentially fully with the conditions as recommended by the Planning Commission. There was some discussion about the emergency access and how that worked, and another technical matter on some right-of-way, but effectively followed the Planning Commission's recommendation on approval of that subdivision map, and it also came along with a zoning map amendment, went with that. Just to note, for the next regular Planning Commission meeting is March 31st. There's 2 partial right-of-way abandonments on that. I think it's another one from the Public Works Department and maybe a couple from the Public Works Department. And then a special use permit for auto body repair in commercial district at 2234 South Carson Street, and also a special use permit, a modification to Carson City, Carson Middle School special use permit. They're adding a generator building there. And again, we'll consider whether or not to take up, maybe have some discussion with, maybe we take that up early and we're able to use the full time, more time without interruption to
Okay.
to finish signs at that time if that works. But I'll check schedules. I know it's a little bit unusual to have the early afternoon meeting, but I'll check with everybody and we'll reschedule that. That's all I have. Hope, do you have anything? Oh, yeah, that's right. Ben, I'll see if Ben wants to add anything, but we've just been reassigned. They've shuffled everybody in the DA's office to get cross-training in different departments. So I think, we've had Ben because he's continued on these issues with us, but Todd Reese is going to be our new Deputy District Attorney at future meetings. So we'll introduce him at the next meeting.
Okay. Well,
But thanks,
Deputy
thanks for
District
your,
Attorney Johnson, we're sorry to see you go.
Yeah, thanks for your help, Ben. We've been.
Just keep us out of jail.
Thank-
That's all we ask.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure working with the Planning Commission. I'll still probably be involved a little bit with some of the, Title 18 stuff as we move forward, help transition Todd on, but I leave you in good hands. So it was a pleasure working with all you, and I'm sure I'll see you again.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the commission? The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Do we have any callers left?
There's no public comment at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. A motion to adjourn? Second?